Ooh, we are going to talk a little bit about Recoil and React. What is Recoil? There are a bunch of state management systems like this, Recoil, Redux, Bobex. There's a few other ones. Redux, I think, is the most popular one or the most prevalent one. Uh, Read Redux is really good. It's a little bit more complicated than I like, and I tend to use Recoil on my personal apps these days. I'll definitely use Redux on a larger thing, but anything that I'm going to spend less than a month on, definitely use Recoil. So, what's a state management system? A state management system is basically a way. So, the way we've been doing it, we do a fetch or we load a bunch of data and put that in state in our app. And like my state philosophy talk, uh, state should describe the state of the component and not necessarily just like data that lives in it. If we want data, we should pass that in through a prop or something probably. So, and if we have, you've seen this before, if we have our state up in app and we have something two or three layers down, we need to just pass it down, pass it down, pass it down. And then if we want a callback to change it, we need to pass it up, pass it up, pass it up, which, works rule one, but it's a pain. It's a lot of extra typing, and it's kind of brittle if we decide to move that bottom component somewhere. We need to pull out all that wiring and rewire it again. So, state management systems basically say, I've got some data. I want it to sit kind of alongside of the tree of our React app and allow the React app to access that data, read it, and change it as needed. So that is basically what we're going to set up here. Most of them use things called a store. You'll see that language in Redux, and I think Mobix does it that way. Recoil does kind of the same thing. It's just a matter of terminology. What Recoil does is use things called atoms that are basically just pieces of state or state-like things that live in the Recoil store outside of the thing being your app. And basically, you get little hooks into that store outside to interact with it. So it's probably longer to talk about it than it is to just do it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can take a look and hope I've got everything all set up right. Reading games. Let's get our chat up over here. Get our faces up over here. Media controls hidden. All right. So this should look familiar by now. We've got our React app. There we go. Terminal, don't need terminal. Nope, I don't. Great. So this is our React app. I've got it in code here. This is all the basic stuff. It's by default the thing. So I'm just going to pull out some stuff here and let's do, I'm just going to do a counter. How about that? So I'm going to do it first the way that we have been doing it, and then I will update it to use Recoil. So all I want to do is have a count that goes up or down, and a button that makes it go up, and a display. And I'm going to make those grossly separated. So I'm going to have in here a counter and a counter button. And so let's go ahead and make those. I'm going to make a counter.js. And normally I would do this a couple layers through. I don't think we need to do a couple layers through to get the idea. We all know the idea. I'm going to say export default function counter boot. And I'm going to make a counter button. Something there. Great. So here is that. Where's my app? There it is. Let's make sure. There we go. Counter. Let me retype those with the imports. One more time. Counter. Not important. Why no import? Oh well. It did that. I don't know why it didn't do the other one. Counter. Counter. And in our counter, I'm just going to have it take a prop of a count and just going to display it in I'll do it in a div with an H1. Why not? I'll use an H1 for this because I'm just going to do it with the div. Picky, picky, picky. And I'm just going to display the count here. Count. And the counter button, all it's going to do is increase the thing that I'm passing to it, the words. When you click the button, it will call the callback and increase the state up top. So I'm going to say handle click. And here I'm just going to return a div with a button in it. Click is handle click. And on-click is handle click. And in here, we're just going to say count plus one. Cool. So in our app, it should have great. I'll just make those bigger there. So we got a count plus one. We don't have any state or anything set up, so I'm going to set up a state in our app, and that's just going to be a count and set count. You state, and let's just start at 0. So now our count should start at 0. Nope, we're not passing it down. We're not passing anything down yet. Count equals count, and handle click equals. So we want to have a little function here that says set count, count plus 1. I think that might do it. So now here's our count 0. When we click count plus 1, it should hit that handler and increment it. Cool. And I'm not going to demonstrate, but you can imagine if counter was inside a component that was inside a component and had to pass the count down a couple layers. Same with counter button. If this was inside a component that was inside a component, we would have to pass that handle click down a couple layers. So it would be a little bit of a disconnected mess. So, and more irritating to me personally is having our state, which is our data here. And this could be, it could be a count, could be an array of objects. It could be anything you want. So that's how the basic thing works. I'm going to hook us up with some recoil now. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a recoil store that is hooked into our app. I'm going to create an atom that hooks into that store, and that allows us to increment that count and read that count without having to pass it around. So first off, we're going to insert actually, let me do, what do I want to do? Yeah, I'll do it that way. So it's a module you can install with npm. So I'm going to npm install recoil. I think it's just recoil. Yeah. And that should add that to our package JSON. Here's our recoil there. Great. And I need to delete a couple of the things from our. I don't need the logo. Yeah, I think that's all. Cool. So I've got recoil installed here. Excuse me. So the thing that we need to do to hook it into our application is actually, we're going to do that we could do it in our app. I like to do it in our index, because that way it's kind of like wrapping the whole thing, and we don't need to worry about it inside our actual application, because the index is just kind of like the loader for our app, right? So there's a few things we need to import from recoil to make that happen. I'm just going to wrap our app with it, I guess. So I'm going to import. It's out of the way. Let's confuse them. I'm going to import recoil root. There it is from recoil. So recoil root is a component, just like strict mode is a component, right? I can do recoil root. And I don't know if we've really talked about components with children, but we've been kind of implicitly using them. Basically, recoil root's just a component. It just happens to have our app as a child. And what that looks like is, and you can do this with any component, you can grab, I think it's children as a prop out of props, and that will contain all the things that have been rendered into it. So basically, recoil root saying, hey, take everything the app is rendering, so our whole application that we're using, and add some stuff to it with my component. You don't need to technically know how it works, but it's pretty cool if you want to dig into it. So that means that recoil is hooked into our application now. We don't really have to do anything else. If we're using Redux or something else, there's other steps to hook in the store and all this stuff. This should do it. We'll see. So I like to put atoms in their own. Is there a chat now? It's the same thing over there. Normally, I'll put in if I'm writing my own custom hooks, which are really cool, and maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow. If we haven't already, I like to put stuff like that in a library directory, and so I'll create a file called atoms. And if I had other use whatever custom hooks, I put them in lib too, just to keep them separated. But that's not what we're doing there. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an atom, and all an atom is an basically it takes an object that has a unique key for that atom, describing it's kind of like the variable name we give in use state, and just a default value. So atom is a function that we're going to get from recoil. So I'm going to say here constant, we'll call it a counter atom. And oops, is it going to import it for me? Oh, okay, great. Maybe. Is it going to import it for me? Yeah. So we're just importing the atom function from the recoil library, and we're going to pass it an object that describes that atom. And could not be simpler. There's a key, and I'm just going to call this counter key. And we never really touch the key. That's just for internal use. Basically, that's recoil keeps basically a big object, and that's the key that it uses for that object. So these all need to be unique if we're doing more than one, which we normally will be. And now let's give it a default value. Default is 0. Great. And that's it. That's how you create an atom in recoil. So now all we need to do is hook it up. So there's a few ways we can do that. First, I'm going to get rid of this because that is literally all we need to do there. I'm going to go into our app, and I'm going to pull out the state, and I'm going to pull out these props because we don't need them anymore. And already this is nice or clean. We know we have an app with a counter and a counter button. We don't need to know anything else about those because we don't need to mess with the state in out here. The app is just holding all of our things together. So let's look at counter first. So since we're not getting that from state, we don't need to bring it in, or we're not getting that from the app state. We don't need to get it as a prop. So again, simplify. What we do need to do is tell it that count is going to be read from our recoil store. And the way we do that, so there's three methods we can use. Let me do this here. Did I get, no, I didn't. So just like we would do const count, set count equals use state 0. So this is how we would set up a state. I'm just going to get rid of that. Similarly, we can set up a recoil state, and it's going to use a hook called use recoil state. There it is. And same thing, only this time instead of giving a default value, we need to give it the atom itself. So we're also going to import that atom. And that was a counter atom. Yeah, we need to import that. And you can see counter atom is exported, export const. So I'm importing use real estate. I'm importing my counter atom from libatoms. So all this is a constant. Literally, it's just an object, and we're just exporting that by name and grabbing it here. And that's it. This is just our state here. We're not ever doing a set count in here. So instead of using the full state, we can say, I think it's use recoil value. There it is. And I don't think we need that anymore because it's just giving us the count. So instead of doing a getter and setter for everything, if we don't need the setter in here, we can just use the value from the state. And this should give us just a 0. Great, that looks good. Reloaded. And now we just need to hook up our button. So again, our app doesn't have anything, so we don't need to pull in a handler from handle click. And we're going to write our own function here. So we're going to say function, or write our own handle click function, handle click. And all we're going to do is here, we're going to import that same atom. So we're going to import that counter atom. And we're going to say, here we're going to only set up our setter. So it's going to be a constant set counter. And that's going to be use recoil set value store. What is it? Use set recoil state. That's what it is. Use set recoil state. And so all this is just the setter. So again, we're not using the value of count in here, so we're just getting the setter for it. And again, we have to pass in the atom so it knows which value we're doing. And then in a handle click, all we need to do is here say what we had in before. And in fact, we don't even need to do that if we want to do that inline. Ooh, this is going to save us a little bit of. We're just going to say set counter to. We do need both of them here. So instead of just doing the set recoil state, we're going to get both. Misspoke. And so this is just me use recoil state. Recoil state. There we go. So now again, this is looks just like a regular state, except we're getting it from the store that lives outside of the app. And now this should be doing the same thing. It's just when we click it, we're going to use that set counter and click it. So in theory, everything should work the same as it did before. Nope, count is not defined. Count. Oh, I'm not using the, because it's count, not counter. Count. Set count. Cool. There we go. Now it should work the same. Boom, 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 boom. Great. So now instead of having a state up here that, that data has really nothing to do with app at all, that data just is used by the app. Now, instead of having to pass stuff around, we can just use it in the places where it's being used. And again, if this was like 3 or 4 down, 2, 3 down, we wouldn't have to pass it down. And if we decide to take this and move it somewhere else, there's no rewiring to do. This, of course, is a trivial example, but yeah, this is the example. So that's how you set up a basic store. Any questions?
Yes. So for the recoil wrap that you put on in the index.js, how does that interact with the wrap for setting client side routes? Because I know we wrap it
Hmm.
as well. Does it go inside or outside, or
Either
does it
one.
matter? Or
I could put it outside here if I wanted to, like as long as
oh,
as long as at some level it's wrapping your app.
it
Um,
should make a difference.
yeah, it shouldn't
Okay.
make a difference.
Okay. One other question. So in atoms.js, you could just put any number of these little statey guys,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
key is counter key. I didn't see you use counter key anywhere
Yeah, because that
else. I
is
might have
only
overlooked
used.
it though.
Yeah, that's only used internally by Recoil. So this could, literally just be whatever you want, as long as
Right.
it's unique. That's just the basically Recoil keeps a big object kind of, and that's the key it's going to use for that piece of state. Um,
Okay.
it's nice to name it what it is, just
Mm.
so it's easier to read. But yeah, you could generate unique IDs or just say key one and do it's just nicer this way. But yeah, as long as it's a unique string, you're never going to see it outside of this file.
Okay. And it's always just import atom from
Mm-hmm.
recoil. Okay. Yeah, I might have to watch the video back just to connect the dots a little bit, but otherwise think I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me actually find it here. Their documentation is really great. It is at where's our chat? And here, yeah, and I think the getting started one is good. Um, this is the getting started one. You can step through it in like literally 5 or 10 minutes, do exactly this, and you're up and running. There are a few things with atoms that you can play with. Um, you can like you can do some more complex stuff with it, um, but you don't need to. It works just fine if you just use it like this. Um, and same with selectors. Like you saw, there's a bunch of things that you can use with recoil. Um, but yeah, to like everything you would need to use in an app that you'd be building here, we just went through. And everything else is just fanciness.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. What other questions do we have? Cool. Is there anything else I want to talk about? Yeah, it's fine. The state, so you can read, write, or read and write, like we saw there. Yeah, I think that's all I really need. And that, I'm not missing anything. There's not a lot to it, which is great. It just does the thing and gets out of the way. Yeah, and so basically, I start off with recoil every time, even before I start putting states in, because I know I'm going to be using some data in my application, um, but I don't want to have to pass it around. So if you would like to use this um, in your project, feel free. It is super fun. Oh, and look at this. Bye bye, use state. You're still going to want to use state for some things, right? Like if let me close this out. You're still going to be using state for some things because state is for tracking the state of the component. So, like if you have a modal that is showing or not, or if you're controlling components, you still want to keep that state in that the component with the form. If you have a dropdown that's showing or not, or dark mode on or off. There's still plenty of places where you're going to want to use state to represent the state of the component, but having your data sitting alongside of it that you can just kind of grab at will is such a time saver and it satisfies rule 2 super hardcore because it makes it way easier to think about like, oh, here just in this component, I'm just using this value. I don't have to worry about where it's getting passed from or how to set it somewhere else or which level I should keep that application, that data state in. So yeah, it just makes it way easier to think about and debug because there's less surface area for bugs to live on. So yeah, I recommend, again, totally optional. I recommend giving it a try, at least just run through the little tutorial to see if it's something that tickles you. And if not, totally cool. do it the old way. It all works. Mm, yeah. Other questions we have? Cool. Well, I will stop it here. I'll post this video up in usual places, post it on the channel. And yeah, if you have any other questions, give me a holler. I'll be around. Thanks for hanging out.